open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry. It is 6 o'clock and I'm with you till 7. Coming up tonight, now, Bibi Stockholm, they are finally on board, at least some of people are anyway, but we're also talking about islands here and plans there. It's not escaped my notice that actually all of this talk is about what do we do with people once they are here. Has our government given up on the actual task of stopping people trying to reach this country in the first place? And I also want to talk to you, a deep and meaningful religion. Fewer of us than ever before now follow religion, particularly when it comes to things like Christianity. I can't help but notice as well that this country does seem to be in a bit of a mess. Is there a link between the two? If you don't have that central religious focus, does it lead to potential carnage elsewhere? And Richard Branson, a man I massively admire, he says politicians are lacking the courage to admit that their drug policy has failed. He says it is now time for massive, monumental reform when it comes to the law around drugs. Is he right or wrong? And I've just had a lovely weekend away with my family, but in a place that I could not spend a single penny of cash. We've also now got banks basically saying they are going to limit how much cash you can put into your banks, never mind withdraw. What is going on? I want to talk again about our Do Not Kill Cash campaign. We've got it all coming up. Housewife favourite as well, Ben Habib, keeping me company. But before we get into it all, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Well, the top story today is that buses have been arriving at the Bibby Stockholm to deliver migrants to their new accommodation. Today, it's not known how many asylum seekers are arriving today, but we do know that the refugee charity Keva Calais says several migrants who were given notice to relocate to the barge did not board after their lawyers had their transfers cancelled. Well, health and safety concerns have also caused further delays, with the Firefighters Union, the FBU, warning the barge is a potential death trap. Safeguarding Minister Sarah Dines told GB News, though, that the move is justified despite the concerns.
Anything like this, where large groups of migrants are congregated, is never popular, which is why we have to stop the crisis in the Channel. But we can't do that by having the pull factors of having wonderful hotels being used for illegal migrants who've travelled through several safe countries to get here. Let's not forget that.
Well, that was Sarah Dines. We can also tell you the Shadow International Secretary Nick Thomas-Simons told GB News Labour would find a way to stop the small boat arrivings.
What we will be doing is driving down that asylum backlog. We'll do that firstly by using the £140 million the government's currently spent on the Rwanda plan, which has sent more Home Secretaries to Rwanda than people, to actually have a cross-border policing unit to try and bust the model of the people smuggling gangs so that fewer people end up in the English Channel on that dangerous crossing in the first place.
Well, local campaigner Kate Robson from the group No to the Barge says the vessel she thinks is a safety risk.
If you look at the gangway going up the side of that vessel, it is very narrow and it is high. You have 500 men. If there's an incident in the middle of the night, they all speak different languages. It could be chaos trying to get off there. And I am very concerned, and also for our firefighters as well. But our issue is not with the asylum seekers at all.
Well, a senior source has told GB News that any plans to send asylum seekers to Ascension Island in the South Atlantic for processing is pie in the sky and unachievable, the source told us. The plans were already considered and dismissed by both Boris Johnson and the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, as completely unworkable. The island is a British overseas territory located over 4,000 miles away. And businesses and landlords who knowingly support illegal migrants will face increased fines from next year. Under new government plans, bosses who employ asylum seekers could see penalties of up to £60,000 per breach. That's triple the current amount. The Prime Minister also says he's increased police raids by 50% to help clamp down on illegal workers. The Home Office saying illegal working and renting are significant pull factors for those making the dangerous journey across the English Channel. Well, that comes as the leader of a criminal gang which recruited illegal migrants to work as cleaners at Sainsbury's supermarkets has been jailed for 6 years. Mamadou Chune was found guilty of 6 counts of assisting unlawful immigration and 3 counts of concealing criminal property. 4 others were also sentenced. The organised crime group profited from around £600,000 by facilitating the work placement and housing of around 40 illegal workers in Wiltshire and in Oxfordshire. Now, the bodies of 3 people have been found in Glencoe. Police Scotland say the hill walkers were reported missing after failing to return from a trip on Saturday. The alarm was raised shortly after 9 o'clock that evening. The force says there are no suspicious circumstances. NHS consultants in England will strike in September if they don't reach an agreement with the government, they say. The BMA is saying staff will be walking out on the 19th and 20th of September if the Health Secretary doesn't return to the table to discuss pay and reform to the pay review process itself. Scientists have started developing new vaccines as an insurance against future pandemics. The work is being carried out at the government's high-security Porton Down laboratory in Wiltshire. The doctors have drawn up a list of animal viruses which are capable of infecting humans and could potentially spread around the world. Sport, and the Lionesses have secured a place in the quarter-finals of the Women's World Cup after a dramatic penalty shootout win over Nigeria. England scored 4 goals, while Nigeria netted only 2, following the 123-minute match. Chloe Kelly scored the winning goal following other successful shots from Beth England, Rachel Daly and Alex Greenwood. Lauren James was sent off during the match, though, for stamping on one of the Nigerian players. The Prince and Princess of Wales have congratulated the Lionesses, and they now face Jamaica or Colombia in the quarter-finals on Saturday. Fans describe the game as an emotional rollercoaster.
Really tough game. Obviously, Kira Walsh came back, but shifted after being injured, going down to 10 players. But we were always going to win the game, always.
Amazing, honestly, I can't believe it. It was hard, it's a tough game, but we got there in the end, you know.
I'm really happy that we managed to get through, but I think they could have played better though.
You're watching and listening to GB News across the UK, on your TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker now by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. Hi, I'm Michelle Dewbers and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight alongside me, CEO of First Property Group and the former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib and the former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. Good evening, gents. Have you been watching the Lionesses, Ben?
I haven't, I'm afraid.
Right. James, have you been watching the
Only
Lionesses?
the highlights. The time zone makes it quite difficult to watch them live. But yeah, I've been watching them.
Have you been watching them at home? Is it your kind of thing? Get in touch and let me know. Are you into all of that or not? Get in touch, the usual ways. And you can tell me what else is on your mind tonight. GBviews at gbnews.com is how you reach me. Or Twitter or X or whatever it's called these days at GB News. You can get me there. Now, our top story tonight, after goodness knows how long of will they, weren't they, well, anyway, yesterday they have. Kind of. I'm talking about the Bibby Stockholm now. People are on board for the first time today. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, is live in Portland, Dorset. Mark, good evening to you. Talk us through, for anyone that's just switching on their TV and radio today, does not know what's been occurring, an update, if you will.
Well, yes, we had the first buses arriving sort of mid-morning, and a few buses have arrived now, but not many people on board as far as we can understand. Probably less than 20. We're awaiting a definitive word really from the Home Office as to how many people were on board those buses. We had Care for Calais saying that they have been involved in some last-minute interventions. I think it was always predictable that human rights groups, the charities, lawyers representing some of these Channel migrants would try to intervene to stop some of them going on board the barge. That appears, to an extent at least, to have been successful. But I think once we get confirmation from the Home Office of how many have gone on board, we'll have a better idea. We were expecting 50 to go on board as the first cohort today. So let's just see what they say in the coming hours. But about 500 is the total that we're expecting in the weeks and months ahead. Will we get to 500? I'm not sure. There are these concerns lingering about the fire safety on board that barge, where it's been said that it was only ever designed for a maximum of 250 people, and to put double that amount on then raises some serious issues about whether those people could evacuate quickly enough if there was a fire on board.
Mark White, fascinating stuff. Thank you for that update. One of my viewers, he's just got in touch, Howard. He says, I am sick of hearing about the migrant crisis. He puts it in capitals, so I know you mean business, Howard. He says the reason why he's sick of hearing about it, in his words, not mine, he says, the battle is lost. Basically, no one's going to do anything. He says he doesn't feel like anything's going to happen. So all this conversation is pretty much pointless. And it got me thinking, Ben Habib, there is a lot of stuff going on at the moment about what we do when, people get here. Do we send them on this barge? Do we send them to this island? What do you do? the conversation about how actually to stop people and defend our waters, etc., in the first place seems to have almost died a death now.
Completely. I mean, we've never had the political will or courage to actually stop the boats, have we? We've tried any measure, any and all measures, with the exception of actually stopping the boats. And when Rishi Sunak says his top pledge, well, his top of, of his 5 pledges is to stop the boats, or was it the bottom one? I can't remember. He's got
in a minute. In fact, actually, you've just teed it up nicely, because he had a 5-point plan, right? But today he's unveiled like a sub-plan. Like, it's like a 5-point plan within the 5-point plan. Let's just have a little listen to this. This one's specifically about the boats.
Here are 5 things I'm doing to stop the boats. First, I'm bringing in new laws that will mean if you come to the UK illegally, you can't stay, no matter how hard you try. Second, I've secured a deal with France that will help stop the boats at source before they cross the channel. I've also negotiated a deal with Albania, which has already helped us bring down crossings from there by 90%. Third, I've increased raids by 50% to clamp down on illegal workers. Fourth, I'm ending the farce of illegal migrants being put up in hotels by the taxpayer. Fifth, I'm ensuring that the only way to come to the UK for asylum will be through safe and legal routes. I know stopping the boats is a priority for the British people, and I'm leaving no stone unturned to get it done.
Well, the conspicuous absence there was actually stopping the boats. We have a border force, we have a navy.
I found that weird.
Oh, well, the whole thing's
I
weird,
sat and watched that. I mean, I saw it earlier on. I watched that back again then. And I find myself kind of thinking, it's almost like it's not real. It's almost like some kind of weird sitcom. It's just weird, odd.
Well, I mean, when I was hearing the news about the barge today, I was thinking this is almost like Carry On Migration. Do you remember the Carry On films?
No, I'm only 21, Ben Habib. I'm way too young now, Jones.
But, I mean, it is becoming a farce. If you're a smuggler of people and you want to cross the channel with a whole load of illegal migrants, you look at what's happening in the UK, you look at the failure in Rwanda, you look at the failure of the Nationality and Borders Bill, you look at the failure of the Illegal Migration Bill, which is yet to make it onto the statute books, and contrary to what Rishi Sunak just said, there will be a massive carve-out for the European Court of Human Rights in that very act. You look at all of this and you just end up laughing, including our inability to move illegal migrants from hotels onto a barge which has a gym, a snooker table, 24/7 medical care, taxis in and out of Portland, a shuttle bus to take you to the point of collection. I mean, we couldn't be treating these people, in a more civil, generous, hospitable manner.
I mean, this whole thing is a cruel theatre. That's actually what it is. OK, if you actually wanted to reduce the number of people who are risking their lives crossing the channel, you would actually have safe routes. There are no safe routes for people to claim asylum to come into this country unless you're coming from Ukraine or Hong Kong.
Or Afghanistan.
Which is basically closed. The Home Affairs Select Committee report said it's basically closed. So there's effectively no legal route from Afghanistan, which is why in the crossings last year, the largest country people were coming from was Afghanistan. So if we want to help people that are fleeing war and persecution, there is no way, there is no safe route. And this barge and all the latest, we'll send a few people here, a few people there, there is a backlog of 170,000 cases to be processed. And year on year, the government is reducing the ability to process those cases. Just this weekend, the 60 legal firms that do the legal work for migrants have written to the Justice Secretary saying they're not going to do it anymore because the fees have been capped since 2005. The amount that's spent on translators has reduced. We don't have enough caseworkers. If you want to process the cases, it's not about moving 500, let's say 500, even though that's double what the safe limit is.
That's pretty good, though, isn't it? Capping costs, putting a limit on costs, I would say, is pretty sensible.
Well, not if you're not processing the 170, which they aren't. The 170,000 backlog cases that need to be processed to work out what are people's needs, what are people's rights, how can they be helped. That's not being done. So all of this stuff, They
threw the rule book out of the window the other day, James. I don't know if you saw that, saying that actually you don't have to present yourself, you don't have to answer any questions, fill this form in, and we'll speed up your asylum process. Do you remember that?
Do you know what?
For 12,000 people.
For 12,000 people from Afghanistan.
For 12,000 people who were, I think, the oldest on the waiting list.
And they were also from countries with a 98 or 99% acceptance thing. So in an ideal world, would you do that? No. In an ideal world, everyone would have a face-to-face interview and you do all of that stuff. But when the backlog is this big...
When you're saying, oh, you've got this really high acceptance rate, do you think that's because people are genuinely meeting the criteria, or do you think that's because people are now become so smart at fiddling the system that actually there's massive flaws in the system? Because I would say it's the latter.
I think if you're coming from Afghanistan...
But you're coming from France, though, aren't you? Let's be... You might have originated wherever, but you're coming from France.
Right, and people stop moving when they feel safe. People from Afghanistan might have completely legitimate connection to Britain, given that we occupied their country for 20 years. They might have worked with the BBC, with other British institutions. They might speak English. There are perfectly understandable reasons. If you were an Afghan... person who was, for example, you had this job in Afghanistan, for example, you might want to leave the country now because of the conditions in which
we have granted asylum to a lot of Afghanis.
The question I was being asked, though, is do I think they're fiddling the system? I think the equivalent of Michelle in Afghanistan, if they claim asylum here, no, of course they're not fiddling the system.
But we have had very cast iron evidence now of there is a whole racket set up from whether it's lawyers helping people to cheat the system, whether it's medical people helping people cheat the system by giving them kind of falsified information, if you like, when it comes to people's medical records. We hear now today that apparently some people have been stopped getting on these boats, these barges or whatever, because they've got so much trauma being surrounded by water that this barge is going to trigger their thing. Well, if you've got so much trauma that gets triggered by surrounded by water, why have you just got on a dinghy then? Where was your trauma then? It don't wash with me.
Yeah. I find, OK, firstly, in any system, is there going to be a little bit of action around the edges? In every single system there is, right? But what we're talking about here is, in the main, people fleeing war and persecution in their countries, trying to start a new life here, trying to contribute to our societies. These people are not a threat to us. They're not a threat
James, of course there could be a threat to us. We don't know who these people are. They dispense with their paperwork before they get here. We've got no clue. The whole point about border control, I'm not talking, the whole point about border control is to be able to control who's coming into the country, in part including knowing who they are.
Which is why you need to have a proper process to be able to assess the cases. 10 years ago, before a lot of these cuts, 98% or something of cases were assessed in 6 months. Now it's almost zero. That's why we have a problem, and barges and Rwanda and any of those things isn't going to solve it at all. It just carries on this cruel theatre.
Last week, I was talking about, I think it was Mel Stride's idea about over 50s getting on their bikes and delivering pizzas. Do you remember that? I'm sure it was only a few days ago, maybe Thursday or Friday or whatever. And I was thinking this weekend, why isn't there a policy then? If you've got all these over 50s that are economically inactive, you're desperate to get them into the world of work again, why don't you create like a crack team of, like experts now, get people back in from industry, train them up and get them processing the asylum backlog? Why isn't that the focus? Why instead are we telling people to deliver pizzas? That might be a fast way of getting it done. Would you go back into the workplace to help tackle this asylum backlog? Good idea or not? Is it a theatre? According to James, do you agree with that? Give me your thoughts, gbnews@gbnews.com. Now, I've got a very interesting question that I want to pose to you next. Of course, now, when it comes to religion, fewer of us are following any religious path, and I'm wondering, do you think there's a link between that and some of the weird craziness, social dysfunction that is happening in this country right now? Yes or no?
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I am Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. We've just been debating whether or not we've given up, quite frankly, when it comes to even trying to stop people getting in those dinghies and coming to this country in the first place. Ken says, why can't the supply of these small boats be traced and stopped? Surely, he says, it's tapping into the supply of that which will fix the problem. I think there's conversations now about trying to do that in collaboration, I think, with the Germans, perhaps. John says nobody is fleeing persecution from France, and that undermines everything that the pro-immigration lobby want to ignore. Ron says, how do you process these people fairly and accurately when all you've got to go on is the information that they tell you? Does that not open the system up to abuse? There you go, your thoughts. Keep them coming in. But alongside me till 7 tonight, the CEO of First Property Group and the former Brexit Party MEP, Ben Habib, and the former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider, keeps me company. Now, are you a religious person? And if so, are you practising in your religion and your faith? I've started thinking today about an article, triggered, I accept, by an article by a journalist called Tim Stanley, where it's looking at things like, for example, the trans ideology in society and connecting that perhaps in some way to the decline of religion. He's pondering whether or not it has led to a form of kind of social dysfunction, if you like, and the prevalence of dangerous ideologies. What do you think to that, Ben Habib?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to say one thing.
You may.
All people are equal, whether they're trans, BAME, black, South Asian, whatever they are, whatever religion they believe in, all people are equal. And I think
why do you feel the need to say that?
Because,
I find that intriguing.
Yeah, because I think what the debate has been hijacked to the point where the debate's been hijacked in favour of minorities, whatever minority it happens to be, ethnic, religious, sexual orientation, gender identity. And we promote those minorities above the majority. And I think that's where, in the pursuit of political correctness and creating a level playing field, whatever the original, perhaps honourable motive was, we've gone wrong. And we've promoted these people, these minorities, above and, I think, to the detriment of the majority. So I felt obliged to say everyone is equal before we have this discussion.
Right. We've got it on tape now, so roger that.
One of the core principles of any religion of which I'm aware, with the exception of perhaps Hinduism, which has a caste system, is that all people are equal. Islam says all people are equal. All the Judeo-Christian religions basically say all people are equal. And that is a fundamentally...
What, even non-believers?
Yeah, all people are, in the eyes of God, all people are equal.
Right.
And I think that's a fundamental belief that comes through religion, which we've lost sight of. And when religion occupied our lives, we did have cultural guidance, because it brings cultural guidance with it. It obviously brings moral guidance with it. And then you have the whole set of beliefs. Now, I'm not really into religion in any big way whatsoever, but I would say I'm culturally a Christian, tolerant, open-minded, and I believe in all people being equal. And a lot of the moral guidance that you get from Christianity, I observe and I believe in. And without a shadow of a doubt, when you start promoting an ideology over and above to the detriment of the majority, you have lost sight of your moral compass. And I think this is what's gone wrong. We've allowed the promotion of these minority groups' interests to subjugate the majority, and that is fundamentally wrong.
Do you agree with any of that, James?
I agree that there's a lot of social dysfunction in our society, but I'd probably place it in a rather different place. I think it's pretty dysfunctional if you've got privatised water companies pumping excrement into people's rivers and water. I think if you're in a society that's got billionaires and also children living in poverty, that is dysfunctional. And I think if you look at, as Ben was saying, the core principles of most religions is something along the lines of do unto others as you would have done unto you. And I think I'm not arguing that we should be more religious as a society. I'm a non-secular Jew. I'm not forcing. I wouldn't push religion on anyone, although I have great respect for different people's religions and I have studied them. But I think if we're actually true to those basic principles that come out from religion, we'd have a rather different society, because just looking back at the debate we were having about refugees a minute ago, I think a lot of the things that we were, hearing are not consistent with what Jesus' teachings were, for example.
Well, I would argue, actually, James, what's happened... Sorry,
Jesus was
me.
a refugee.
Yeah, but I would argue that what's happened with the whole refugee debate is we have elevated refugees, or illegal migrants, as I call them, elevated them above our own people.
No, we haven't.
Yes, we have. We are putting them up in 5-star, 4-star hotels. They're refusing to go into barges or into tents that we've constructed for them.
Yeah. We should be putting people in tents.
But we have a whole underclass of British citizens who are homeless, veterans.
And who made who made the veterans homeless? Was it?
No, but how? But charity has to start at home.
The veteran who was in Afghanistan, who's come back with PTSD, with no job support,
he is a very...
with no housing, deserves support and is not getting support.
He is getting support.
Who is not stopping them getting their support? The refugee from Afghanistan who's come from their country being occupied, that person has not made the veteran not get the mental health support, the veteran not get the job, the veteran not get the housing. This idea that that the real antagonism in society is between one minority group and another group that is challenged is absolutely false.
No, but
the people who have benefited,
but James,
the people who have benefited in our society from unemployment, from poverty wages, are not migrants, and they are not the working class majority of this country.
We promote to the point, we put them on a pedestal, these people who've come across from
Watch
France.
the news coverage on this channel. There is no putting them on a pedestal at all.
If you look at the treatment...
There is punching down or kicking down.
We have, last year, we spent 3.7 billion... We've gone back to migrants again. It's a never-ending discussion. Last year, we spent £3.7 billion on housing, feeding, and taking care of the health issues of these people who have illegally entered our country. We have put them on a pedestal to the detriment of British citizens, and that cannot be right.
I mean, we haven't put them on a pedestal. It's not to the detriment of British citizens. Like, the danger to most people who are going about their day, who are worried about how they're going to pay their bills, they're worried about their job security. It's not some people come over in dinghies. That's not what's causing the long-standing economic crisis that we have in this country.
It is a significant contributing factor.
OK.
3.7 billion would almost reduce the lowest tax bracket from 20% to 19%. That would be a big infusion of cash into people's back pockets in a cost of living crisis.
Pay in this country is at the level it was in 2005. People fleeing wars, several of which we were involved in,
But they're not fleeing wars. They're fleeing France.
To seek a place of safety, did not cause the wage stagnation that we have, did not cause the financial crisis, did not cause the soaring handout that was given by quantitative easing in the COVID crisis, which massively inflated the wealth of people that already have money. None of these things were caused by migrants. None of these things were caused by the minority being put on a pedestal above the majority.
Unbridled immigration undoubtedly has kept a lid on wages, undoubtedly has obviated the need for companies to innovate and to upskill, to automate, to increase productivity. It is the big companies that have benefited from it. We've created, I agree, we've created a dependency culture where people can make just as much on benefits, almost, as they would in the lowest paid jobs in the United Kingdom, so they don't do them. So we've fallen back onto unbridled immigration to solve our problems. It's almost a racist response. But we've gone way off the topic, and the topic is that there's an absence of values in society at the moment as a result of trans ideology.
Well, there is definitely an absence of something in society at the moment, and I would say that that is the sunshine. It's supposed to be summertime. What is going on? The weather.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a north-south split with the weather tomorrow. Mostly fine across the north, whereas in the south quite a grey Tuesday with rain and drizzle. From this little weather feature, it doesn't look much, does it? But it is introducing more cloud, rain and drizzle as we go through the evening, and it'll continue across the south overnight. We do have some showers around across northern Scotland at the moment. Some heavy ones here and there as well. They'll steadily fade through the night, and then a good part of Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and eastern England will be dry and clear through the night, and that will allow it to turn a little chilly. Temperatures down into single figures. A mild night in the southwest because the cloud is moving in. It's going to make for a miserly, drizzly start across south and west Wales and southwest England. And some of that light rain and drizzle will trickle towards the Midlands and eventually towards the southeast. So after a bright start here and for East Anglia, it will cloud over. Much of northern England, though, Northern Ireland, central southern Scotland having a fine day with some sunny spells. Just a few showers in the far north where it'll still be breezy. And still on the cool side, temperatures struggling to reach 20 degrees for most of us. But there are signs of warmer weather on the way. A fine day for many on Wednesday. It will be again quite cloudy in the west. Some patchy rain for Northern Ireland, certainly in the morning. A bit misty and murky around the coasts in the southwest. But for a good chunk of the country, Wednesday looking dry with some hazy sunshine and starting to turn a little warmer with temperatures more widely into the 20s.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, there you go. Where is that summer? I was hoping that was going to tell me it's on its way, but I don't think so, do you? Anyway, we're just talking, Diane on Twitter says, we've just been having a conversation about whether or not people like migrants, refugees, whatever we want to call them, are placed above people in this country. The argument she's been hearing is no, we're not. Well, Diane says, what about all those British workers then that have just been sacked from their jobs in all of the hotels? Certainly they would feel lower in the pecking order, that is for sure. Lee, we've just been querying the decline of religion. Lee says work is the new religion, and that is why he says we are going as a society to hell in a handcart. I might carry on that conversation actually in a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening. from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 alongside me. Ben Habib and James Schneider are still here. Graham says, I thought you were supposed to be talking about religion then, Michelle. Why did you go off topic? We did go off topic a little bit, but it was indeed connected. Peter says, Michelle, don't make me laugh. A lack of religion is a sign of intellectual common sense. He says religious beliefs are responsible for the vast majority of wars. Globally, Pete says, I've got a strong opinion on this religious topic. I'm in full agreement with Richard Dawkins. He says religion is the root of all evil. Sean says people have replaced traditional religion with new ones, things like sex and gender and race and politics. He says, but the trouble is they're all zealots, extremists, fundamentalists, and we are now going through the inquisition of work cancel culture, the torture and the public execution of those that blaspheme. Why are you laughing? I think Sean's got a good
he
point.
put it very well, but I mean, you know, exemplified the whole issue very well, I think, absolutely.
But does it matter that fewer people are following like a religious kind of framework? Because I am not overly religious, I must confess, but I do think that religion gives a framework.
It does.
I think it's very important, particularly for family units sometimes, not always, I confess, but in terms of family life, I think religion can really help provide a framework there for people. And I think what's happening is those kind of the value sets, that commonality, that shared connection, that shared belief in something, that does seem to be kind of dissipating now. And then into that void becomes this kind of, I think a man can become a woman, and if you disagree with me, then off with your head, quite frankly, kind of thing. And I do think it might be problematic for that reason.
Well, I mean, I completely agree. I think there are cultural guidances, there are cultural benefits you get from religion, there are moral guidances, and you also are, I think, people who are religious have a kind of inner peace and self-confidence, which you lose if you completely give, I'm not saying, sorry, I just rephrase that, you don't necessarily lose it, but you're at risk of losing that self-confidence if you don't have faith. If you have faith, you have self-confidence because you believe in God. You instantly have that reassurance that faith gives you. And there is no shadow of a doubt in my mind that the state has interfered so much in our lives that it is now beginning even to occupy the space that used to be occupied by religion. And it comes back, sorry to bring it back to this subject, but it comes back to the environmental, social and corporate governance guidelines that I was talking about, which is pervasive in business, and it's the corporate equivalent of what the government is trying to get us to do in our private lives. And woke is right part of that. The promotion of minorities to the detriment of the majority is part of that. And it's hijacked the whole system. And religion has moved out of the way and allowed it to do it. In fact, the Church of England is complicit in what's going on.
In what way?
Well, we have an archbishop. I used to be shy of saying this, but I feel I need to say it. We have an Archbishop of Canterbury who doesn't believe in the United Kingdom, who holds our history in contempt, who thinks that we should somehow pay reparations for the slave trade, even though it was this country that abolished slavery, that it was this country that spent more money in the 19th century policing the world, trying to eliminate slavery, than it earned from slavery. That's a well-documented fact. And we had the Dean of Trinity College Chapel the other day claiming that Jesus was probably transgender, and he had his congregation in tears. We've got an Archbishop of Canterbury who would promote these illegal crossings of the Channel to the detriment, I would argue, James, of the British people. And so the Church is part of the problem.
I don't think he agrees with you.
The Church has become part of the problem. Religion, as it's been practiced through, the Archbishop of Canterbury, I'm afraid has vacated the field.
I mean, I'm certainly not a spokesperson for the Church of England, but part of the teachings, as I understand it, of the Church is to do with charity, tolerance, and doing unto others as you'd have done unto yourself. All those things you mentioned seem to be in that basic framework. So you can disagree with it, but the idea that this is somehow the downfall of society, it's linked to the collapse of religion. What we do have is a lack of community and a lack of personal, spiritual development in our society.
Where's that lack of community come from? What's causing that?
Well, I think we've had a breakdown of lots of collective civic institutions in the last kind of 40, 45 years as the economy has changed. I think in large parts of the country where you would have had one or two major employers in a place, you would have had lots of people working together. That creates community. You would have pubs and institutions that people are involved in. As our society has become more atomised, we have less community, and we're sitting at home posting angrily on our own rather than being part of something larger together. But there's also space for individual spiritual development and mysticism and so on. But all of these things should be based in an idea of a common humanity and a common kindness, and that. There are some teachings.
But most people are kind, James, whether it's religious people or not. Most people at their hearts are fundamentally
I agree with you. I'm not, and
people.
that's why I'm saying that, firstly, of course, I totally reject this idea that the minority is being put ahead of the majority or whatever.
Oh, it is.
But
it is. Come on, I've just given you one example.
I mean, unless you're talking about the people that own everything, whose interests set the agenda for society, then of course, then we can talk about the many and the few. But I mean, the few that run things are not the 0.% of the population that are trans or whatever that may be.
Right, well, there you go. Do you know what? That is a conversation. I think what I'm going to do one of these days, everybody, is I'm going to do shows maybe once a month or so on the big questions, because some of these issues, they really are kind of broad questions and deep questions that they could spend a whole hour on just a couple of these questions, that is for sure. When I come back after the break, I want to touch on drugs and also on the fact that actually you can pretty much hardly ever spend your pennies, your readies these days anywhere. What is going on when it comes to people taking away our ability to spend our cash?
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 alongside me. Ben Habib and James Schneider continue the conversation. We've just been talking about religion. On Twitter, someone says, Christianity formed the backbone of the West moral compass. He says, I'm not religious, but I do respect what Christianity provides and did to build our society. What do you make to that? Do you agree with it? David says, Michelle, charity begins at home, whether you are religious or you are not. Wealth and riches is the new religion, says another one of my viewers. What do you think to that? Is that something you agree with? Let's talk drugs, shall we? Because we've just been talking about the state of our society and what is to blame in some ways for the kind of decline that we see in a lot of different areas. A man that I admire a lot, Sir Richard Branson, he's been talking out about drugs. He reckons we've lost a so-called war on drugs. We need radical reform now and possible decriminalisation. Well, what do you make to his view on that? Do you share it or not?
Broadly speaking, yeah. The war on drugs hasn't worked. If you look at it doesn't stop problem use, it doesn't stop deaths, it doesn't stop HIV infections. And then you look at countries where they have decriminalised drugs. So if you take Portugal, where we've got about 25 years since they changed the policy, we can look at it. And treatment for addiction is up, HIV cases are down, usage is broadly the same, and deaths are way down. So I think on that basis, that should happen. And then also from a kind of...
For all drugs, though, do you mean? So, like, you would regard, I don't know, say, heroin in the same way that you would regard, say, cannabis?
Well, so I would probably view heroin and people who have heroin addiction as a medical issue rather than as a social issue. So how can
Would you?
Yeah, so how can you treat that as a health issue to try to get the person off that, to try to help them in their lives? And I think we've tried for a really long time using the criminal justice system as the main way to deal with it, and we can see that it hasn't really worked. So I think we should look at other ways to deal with it, and that's what they've done in Portugal. They're looking at doing a trial of something in Scotland. I think these are things that we should be looking at.
Ben?
Well, I mean, just because the criminal justice system hasn't worked isn't, in my view, an argument to legalise it. The criminal justice system is failing us on many, many different fronts at the moment. So-called low-level crime doesn't get punished.
This way, you'd be legalising people burgling your house as long as you're not in.
Absolutely. And actually, you know, Michelle, we've kind of done that because the police say they're not really going to investigate it if your car's been stolen. They're not going to investigate if you've if you've had your shop burgled and so on.
Well, true,
what
but
they call
drugs,
it is part of the same problem. And instead of having the battle and maintaining the battle lines and preventing a recession from good moral behaviour, what we do each time is cede ground and just retreat. And Richard Branson, for all his great business nous, is advocating that we just simply recede away from the battle. And without wishing to misappropriate phrases, you know, minor drug use is entry-level drug, if you like, to bigger issues, to going into crime, to stealing and everything else. So you've got to draw your battle lines, and we mustn't legalise it. We've got to go on fighting the battle. The reason drugs are illegal, let's just remind ourselves, is that they are inherently bad for us. That's why they're illegal.
But so is alcohol in vast quantities.
Yeah, in vast quantities.
So is smoking.
In vast quantities.
So should we have a harm-based policy? So relative harm to relative drugs? Should we have is that what you're suggesting? Kind of science-led, harms-based policy?
Well, I'm very reluctant to put my destiny in the hands of scientists. You know, unbridled sort of authority given to faux knowledge. But look, are you arguing that marijuana should be legalised? Is that where you're going with your question?
Well, I mean, yes, but also in general terms, I think we should have a scientific approach and we should have a humane approach. So the scientific approach is what are the harms to individuals and society, and the humane one is like, if you had a family member who had a drug problem, would you want them to get medical support or would you take them to the police? And I think every single one of us would try to get the medical support, and it's on that principle that we should have that for society.
It's such a difficult conversation, this one, isn't it? Because when you unfortunately get onto the path of drug use, you don't just destroy your own lives, quite frankly. What you do, the harm that you do, especially to your loved ones, your family, and all the rest of it, it really breaks my heart, unfortunately. And is that the answer then? Do we treat these people as victims, these drug addicts? Are they victims that need a big cuddle and a bit of medical help and support as opposed to a police or prison cell? Your thoughts on that? I can't end my show, by the way, without just mentioning again before I head off the Dirt Kill Cash campaign here at GB News. We are passionate about telling people to allow us to keep cash as a way of buying in this country. If you support us, there is the link to do so. I've just come back from a weekend away at Centre Parks, I don't mind saying it. Couldn't spend a penny literally anywhere, not even on the kiddies' little amusement games. I had to do it all on my card. It is absolutely wrong, if you ask me. And if you agree with us, there is the link for you to get in touch on that one. Look, time flies when we are having a good debate. James, thank you very much for your company. Ben Habib, thank you very much for yours. I'm particularly interested on your thoughts on that drug issue and the religious one, topics which I will revisit again on another day. But for now, thank you for your company. Do not go anywhere. Nigel Farage is up next. I will see you tomorrow.
The temperature's rising. Boxed solar. proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a north-south split with the weather tomorrow. Mostly fine across the north, whereas in the south quite a grey Tuesday with rain and drizzle. From this little weather feature, it doesn't look much, does it? But it is introducing more cloud, rain and drizzle as we go through the evening, and it'll continue across the south overnight. We do have some showers around across northern Scotland at the moment. Some heavy ones here and there as well. They'll steadily fade through the night, and then a good part of Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and eastern England will be dry and clear through the night, and that will allow it to turn a little chilly. Temperatures down into single figures. A mild night in the southwest because the cloud is moving in. It's going to make for a miserly, drizzly start across south and west Wales and southwest England. And some of that light rain and drizzle will trickle towards the Midlands and eventually towards the southeast. So after a bright start here and for East Anglia, it will cloud over. Much of northern England, though, Northern Ireland, central southern Scotland having a fine day with some sunny spells. Just a few showers in the far north where it'll still be breezy. And still on the cool side, temperatures struggling to reach 20 degrees for most of us. But there are signs of warmer weather on the way. A fine day for many on Wednesday. It will be again quite cloudy in the west. Some patchy rain for Northern Ireland, certainly in the morning. A bit misty and murky around the coasts in the southwest. But for a good chunk of the country, Wednesday looking dry with some hazy sunshine and starting to turn a little warmer with temperatures more widely into the 20s.
The temperature